We're joined by Corey O'Connor, Democratic candidate for mayor of Pittsburgh. Why are you seeking this office?
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I'm seeking this office because I believe Pittsburgh can do better. And I think my 11 years on city council and my 3 years as the county controller prepares me for this job day one. Right now, we're seeing an administration who is managing decline instead of talking about growth and opportunities throughout our city. And I don't look at, vacancies downtown and vacancies in our neighborhood and blight as a negative thing. I look at it as opportunity. And you need somebody at the mayor's office with a vision to grow Pittsburgh again and provide opportunities to each and every resident in each and every neighborhood. And we aren't doing that right now. We are declining. We are not being transparent with our upcoming budget deficits. We are sleepwalking back into another state oversight. And I think there's a number of issues. I'm sure we're going to talk about them, but I just think this is a great opportunity to rebuild one of America's greatest cities. And I believe with my background, I can do this job and do it effectively right away.
You referenced your experience both on city council as well as Allegheny County controller. How would that experience translate into serving at the mayor's office?
So, day one, and I don't know how many of your viewers follow this, but last year we couldn't turn water fountains on in our playgrounds. Day one, I would be able to call the PWSA, the Public Works Department, plumbers unions, get our water fountains on. Those are basic services that we aren't doing. In this past winter, when we got a snowstorm, the mayor's office had a press conference on Friday. We're prepared for the snow on Saturday. Well, the snow arrived and they weren't prepared, and they actually put out a press release saying we're surprised by the snow. It's just not a prepared administration right now. And also during that time, we had 1/3 of our fleet for plow trucks in the shop. We started renting vehicles. Those are not things that show that you are managing effectively a city like Pittsburgh.
As you talk about the finances, can you talk a little bit more perhaps about what kind of insights you gathered both on the city and county's finances regarding the budget and how things are managed through your role as controller?
Yeah, so in the county, last year we reported, and we do our annual report usually in June. So the past 2 years we've been saying that we have a structural deficit. And the reason for that is because, for so many years, the county, last few years, we've been using the COVID money to plug our deficit. Last year, we said there was roughly an $80 million gap. County executive used that information, went to council, passed a millage rate increase to keep the county as a whole. Now, if you look at the city budget, even for this year, we know that this is a election year budget. Because if you look, and the city has to produce a 5-year budget plan. If you look at year 27, 28, and 29, it shows a decline in revenue, decline in real estate, but also it has $0 set aside for bridge and bridge maintenance. It has $0 set aside for neighborhood improvements, $0 for small businesses. And, those are the things that they're not planning. And if you look back at the $340 million that the city of Pittsburgh got through COVID, yes, they did some plugging of holes to maintain a budget, but then they went out on a hiring spree. And now the individuals that you hire, how are you going to pay for them because the COVID money is gone? When we saw cities across this country prepare, buy new vehicles, we have ambulances in the city of Pittsburgh that break down to and from calls. Some don't even have heat in them. They're from 1984. So to me, you were not planning a city of the future, and this budget clearly shows it's a phantom budget to get through a May primary.
A moment ago, you had made a comment that the city is sleepwalking toward financial disaster, and on your website you note, quote, mismanagement and irresponsible leadership has led us to the brink of returning to Act 47, end quote. How would you manage the city differently?
So, one, you look at internally in the mayor's office. The mayor's budget went from roughly 2.4 million to over 5. There were 8 communications people. And I know you're in comms, so I don't want to say anything bad about people in communications, but 8 people when, again, you have ambulances that break down. You have rec centers that aren't open so that we can't provide space for our kids and families to go to. And yet those are the priorities. You also have now an administration who said they were going to get a nonprofit agreement, a pilot from our major nonprofits, and have gotten $0 in 4 years. So for me, there's so many opportunities with a leader at the helm to rebuild Pittsburgh and bring people to the table that want to be engaged in saving the city money long term. And as I mentioned, if you look at the outgoing budget, here's how we got into Act 47. We went on a hiring spree. We showed a decline in revenue, and we also took on additional debt. The URA took out a bond for $40 million. That's our Urban Redevelopment Authority for affordable housing, which I support. The only thing I didn't support was why did the city take on the deficit and not the authority? And it's little things like that that catch up to you to where you have no capital money in 3 years, to where you have no ability to pay your employees in 3 years. And that's a problem. And that's why, I think right now is a prime opportunity for myself, who has the background in city government, who's now oversaw the county's $3 billion over the last couple of years, to step in and turn this around and turn it around quickly, because we have to.
Why has the city had such a difficult time dealing with its housing needs?
Well, so one, it's coming together with a plan. So affordable housing, we need roughly about 6,000 units. Market rate housing, we need about 15,000 units. Last year, we built maybe 50% less than Cleveland did. That's a city that we used to compete with, Cleveland and Columbus. And right now, those cities are skyrocketing because we are not a pro-growth city anymore. We are stopping things at the basic levels. Permits take way too long. And that permit department is so stressed out because they're so backlogged. You have to look at the details of how you speed up permitting so that people can build more. But also, with that COVID money, we should have been leveling out sites, getting rid of blight for affordable housing units all over the city of Pittsburgh. I represented an area when I was on council. It was the Squirrel Hill neighborhood. And nobody said we could do affordable housing there. It just won't take. You won't get enough tax credits. You won't get any LERTAs. Well, the gateway to Squirrel Hill is now 2 brand new affordable housing buildings. So you can build affordable housing all over Pittsburgh. You just need somebody who's willing to sit down, negotiate for the residents, for the community, and get these things done and spend money. The other thing we haven't talked about yet, the city went out and did a $6 million planning study. Well, that money is going to come back and say, well, you need $50 million to complete the study. So why is that money not being spent in our neighborhoods? Investing in people and small businesses so that they can grow and create more jobs, create more home ownership programs so we can create wealth in our communities. And those conversations aren't happening. We see, again, the last 3 months, it's an election year, so we're coming out with all of these plans. And even when those plans are announced, their response is, these plans won't help anybody for 2 years. Well, what are you doing then? Again, I think it's just frustrating that Pittsburgh deserves better, and we're just not seeing it because we have a great opportunity here to rebuild and bring everybody to the table to be part of that rebuild in Pittsburgh.
What would you do to attract more jobs and to help small businesses succeed?
So obviously invest. For me, I think, if elected, I think you spend at least an hour, if not a couple hours a week, calling the businesses that are here, asking what they need from the city, how do they expand, what do they see as their growth, especially when it comes to robotics and AI, which we know are major hubs in this city right now. But when companies get bigger, they move. We have to entice them to stay longer so that they can create jobs in our neighborhoods, create new businesses that can open up in Pittsburgh. When you have anchors like Pitt and CMU right in your backyard, those jobs should always be staying in Pittsburgh, and right now they're not. And I think that's the frustration that we're seeing. But also, just don't build up new companies without bringing neighbors and residents to the table. We know for every tech job, there's 3 or 4 additional jobs that are created. And those are the jobs that everybody in Pittsburgh can be a part of, but there's no vision to do it right now.
How well has the city of Pittsburgh recovered from the coronavirus pandemic?
That's the whole argument that we are making is you had a prime opportunity to set us up for a 10-year path of growth and opportunity, and yet you went out and hired more employees. You didn't invest the COVID money like other cities did in tech, in their own, fleets. Instead, we went out and hired friends for jobs. That doesn't equate to building a city of the future. And that's very frustrating because the money was there. And now the problem is that money is gone. So, how are we going to pay the employees that we just brought back? That's a tough decision that the next mayor is going to have to work on. And because we want to keep those jobs in public works, but we also want to invest in equipment because by having an extra, let's say 50 employees on a weekend when it snows, if there are no trucks for them to drive in, we don't get a benefit out of it. And I just think it was just a lot of oversight and mismanagement throughout the last couple of years, and we're paying the price for it right now because we are steadily declining and possibly in the next census be under 300,000 people.
What can be done to reduce crime in the city?
Well, first thing is hire a chief of police. Right now, we are on our fifth acting / part-time chief of police in 3.5 years of this administration. If I am an officer and I have no clear direction from the top or nobody is supporting me, why am I going to be concerned about making an arrest, late night when I'm working the overnight shift? And also, what are my shift hours? They've gone from 8 to 10 to 12s, back to 8 to 12s. There is no clear direction. And when you have a backroom deal with chiefs of police and they leave the city of Pittsburgh, the morale is shot. If the top cop is allowed to do whatever he wanted at the time, and if you don't know the background to this, we had a chief of police who was hired in Pittsburgh. The mayor and he had a backroom agreement that he was allowed to go out and referee Big Ten basketball. It's one thing to referee within the city league because you're in Pittsburgh. The Big Ten is now in California. So for him to lie to the public, lie to city council, and also lie to the officers that the chief wasn't going to do it when this chief had a path of doing it, when he was a former city officer, he would go out and referee. When he was the chief in Florida, there was an audit that showed he would leave town to go referee. And then he comes here for, maybe a year and then goes back out to leave town and referee while enriching himself in his pension. And he bumped it up from $50,000 to $92,000. That is pretty bad management. And now the last individual who wanted to be chief applied for the job, was going to be, asked questions by city council, taken to public hearings, which he should have been because the last chief lied to everybody in the city. This person not only removed his name, he quit the force entirely. What message does that send to a new officer that was just hired in Pittsburgh that the chiefs are not even wanting the job? They're quitting the force entirely. So that's how you have to start managing it. And you have to start investing in public safety. And, we have a lot of great programs that we started when I was on council to bring social workers on calls. But invest in programs like that so that social workers, get paid a good wage, but also can extend their hours so that officers, who love that program aren't at 6 o'clock by themselves. So I think there's a lot that can be done, especially when it comes to community policing. But you need a chief that's going to follow directions and also, lead that department. And right now we have none of that.
The current administration was also criticized for the pace at which it was hiring police officers. If elected, what would you do to grow and retain that police force?
Yeah, I mean, it's again investing. We had a training facility that, when this administration took over, asked council, and I was on council at the time, to move $2 million out of the facility, and they were going to put it back in. Well, now it's back in, but it's still 2 years from now. So you took 6 years of investing in a new training facility for current officers as well as new officers, and you are now investing 6 years later. That's not a good sign for officers that are here because you're not investing in them. So I think we have to go out, we have to recruit. Are our numbers going to grow by the hundreds in a year? Absolutely not. Nobody's naive to that. But I think supporting officers, especially officers that want to take the job. So you go to CCAC, you go to high schools, you start attracting, hey, would you like to be a police officer? Here's what the job entails. It's a difficult job, but you make a real difference in people's lives. And I think that's the conversation that has to happen.
How would you address the need for more trained paramedics within the EMS Bureau?
So one, you have to invest in our paramedics. They are, the lifeblood for a lot of people. And when they have ambulances that are breaking down, when they don't have heat in their ambulances, you're not investing in that fleet. And I think for us, recruiting paramedics is again top on the list. These are people that go out and save lives each and every day in our city. And I'm proud that they gave me their endorsement because they understand the difficulties right now in public safety and they want each and every paramedic to be safe and secure when they're out doing their jobs. And they want equipment that works so that they can save more lives.
If elected, how do you encourage the city's large nonprofits to pay into city services?
Yes, again, we had an opportunity to do this, and those larger nonprofits know that they have to be part of a long-term agreement with the city of Pittsburgh. For me, you go to each one of them and you follow within their mission of what they can give. So, for example, the larger nonprofit hospitals, and we just talked about ambulances. My request for them would be purchase 6 new ambulances every year. Also, you can even talk about public works vehicles and plow trucks. We need safe streets so that people can get to your hospitals. Then you go to the colleges and universities and say, hey, what technology have you provided that could help a small business grow or save some money on their overhead? Use the tools that you have already in place, follow under their mission. And I will say, under the prior Mayor Peduto, he did have $100 million plus agreement. It was through a nonprofit, 1PGH, that this administration ignored and let it go. So that's $100 million that was not being used for affordable housing, for green infrastructure, for investing in our neighborhoods. This administration said, no, we don't want to do that. Well, you brought $0 back to the table after you let that $100 million off the hook. But we also have to look at partnering with our smaller nonprofits that aren't going to pay us money, and we don't want them to. We want the smaller nonprofits to be at the table talking about education for our kids, using our rec centers differently. The Carnegie Science Center, the Carnegie Museum, all of those things are great entities, but a lot of people don't have access. So how do we, as the leader of the city of Pittsburgh and the new administration, hopefully, use those smaller entities to enrich the lives of our kids in Pittsburgh? And that hasn't really been talked about because there's no leadership to ask those questions right now.
What do you see as the city's greatest infrastructure needs, and how do you address those?
Obviously, we have bridges that are shut down and no sign of when they're going to open. And I also think, if you look at the stats across the state of Pennsylvania, under Governor Shapiro the last few years, they've rehabbed or built more bridges in that small time frame than any other time in the history of the state almost. And for us to be the city of bridges and get one fixed, and we put no money into it. It was the Fern Hollow Bridge. I was the councilman at the time when the collapse occurred. But we got one bridge, and now we have multiple being shut down. And in our outgoing budgetary years, we have $0 for bridge repair or maintenance. So it shows that you're not investing in our infrastructure. It's also the spring in Pittsburgh. We know what happens in the spring. Potholes pop up all over. And what this administration did was take $5 million out of a pothole budget and moved it aside. Well, now our potholes aren't being filled. People are, breaking down and losing tires almost daily in Pittsburgh. You're not investing in things that support quality of life for our residents right now, and that's the shame of what's going on.
There's been significant changes and some uncertainty at the federal level since the beginning of the year. If elected, would you cooperate with federal officials to deport undocumented immigrants?
No. I was on I was on council the last time this administration was there. We did not partner then. We will not partner now. To me, we actually have to have a conversation about bringing more people to Pittsburgh. And we actually have a population of immigrants in the South Hills that last year created 40 new businesses. Pittsburgh, we should want to welcome new citizens of the United States to Pittsburgh and how they can be a part of our growth conversation. And it's not happening. And for me, knowing that federal funding is a struggle right now, and I think when you look at, especially when it comes to our universities and the cuts that are happening to science and education is really going to impact us. So I would stand up and fight against those changes. I'm doing it right now when we go to rallies as the county controller, but also stand up and fight because those are going to impact our local economy more than people think. When you're not funding life sciences and universities, that creates a huge problem, and it actually doesn't fill a gap in our funding. It actually provides a bigger hole in our funding for a lot of projects locally that provides a lot of jobs in our region. So we will definitely be fighting back against any of those types of changes at the federal level.
Viewers might recall your father, Bob O'Connor, who served briefly as mayor. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned from him and how he influenced your desire to work in public service?
Yes, well, I mean, a lot of things I could say, but he was a people person, and he had on his desk, and I used it when in my desk. It was the number one priority of my job are the people of Pittsburgh, and that's what it is. This is a people business. He worked in restaurants his whole life. He ran the Roy Rogers chains here locally, and now I can only get him on the Turnpike, so I travel the Turnpike a lot. But for me, that's the type of mayor that you have to be. You have to be welcoming, you have to be open, you have to be engaging in neighborhoods, talking to people, because you learn more walking the streets and talking to people than you do sitting behind a desk reading a study that somebody from New York did that doesn't know our city at all. And I think that's what you'll see from our administration, hands-on. And he also, always said this to all of us, my sister and brother and I, was, look, when you leave this earth, you have your name and reputation and your word, and stand by it. And, for me, I take a lot of pride in that, I'm Bob O'Connor's son. I always will be Bob O'Connor's son, no matter what job I ever had in life. But I think this is a prime opportunity to serve the people of Pittsburgh because they mean so much to not only me, but my family over the years. And if given the opportunity, we're going to work just as hard as he did, if not harder, because this is a great opportunity to rebuild our city.
What do you hear from voters when you're out on the campaign trail?
So we're hearing a lot and I agree with them on a lot of these things. We deserve better. We want change. I think everybody agrees that the mayor is a very nice guy. Look, we're friends. We still talk at events. Like, there's no hard feelings here for me. I just see it as, for me, there's a different direction that I believe I could take the city in that's not happening. And I think a lot of people see that. And I think that's good because we're talking about policies and making actual changes in Pittsburgh. And we're not seeing that right now. And I think there was a great opportunity to succeed under this administration, and they just aren't doing it. A lot of people around the city are noticing it.
You've received a number of endorsements, including from the Allegheny County Democratic Committee, from elected officials, from unions, other civics groups. What are the values of these endorsements?
Oh, I think they're very important. I mean, it shows that our message is being heard by everyone. I think winning the Democratic endorsement and being the endorsed Democrat as a lifelong Democrat gives me great pride, but also it's the first time in our city's history that we could find that a sitting four-year mayor who was elected lost their own party's endorsement, who sought the endorsement. The last mayor didn't go after the committee. This mayor did, and he was a city chair at one point. So that shows that our message is getting to the grassroots all across Pittsburgh. And winning that endorsement was very important. And our labor support has been amazing over the past few months. The other endorsement I really like to talk about are the Young Democrats as well as the Pitt Democrats. When you're starting to get your message to young people about growth and opportunity, and they have access to the mayor's office, that's something that maybe those kids are going to want to stay here. And I think those endorsements were very powerful for me, especially when we hit the campaign trail, knowing that our message is really getting across to young people who have a future in Pittsburgh.
How do you differentiate yourself from the other candidates seeking this office?
I think both personalities were very similar in that way. I just think the experience of 11 years on council and now 3 as the controller come in day one and not only make changes, but move Pittsburgh quicker. Right now, we're not seeing any of these policies really impacting our city. We're not building enough housing. We're not creating enough jobs. There was a report that we had the second worst unemployment rate behind San Francisco in the country. Those things give Pittsburgh a bad image. And I think, myself raising 2 young kids here with my wife, I want this to be a city that my kids are going to stay in 20 years from now. And I think this is a great opportunity to rebuild it. And they're just not doing that right now because I don't think that there is a vision in that office right now.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell our viewers why you would like them to elect you mayor of Pittsburgh.
Oh, no, thank you very much. I would just say that, look, Pittsburgh is one of the greatest cities in America. But right now we are on a path to manage our decline instead of talking about growth and opportunity. And for me, there's opportunity all around us. And I'm energetic. I'm excited to start this job. And we don't have time for a 6-month transition. And I think day one, you go in, you make your changes, you're prepared for this job, you bring in the right people that understand local city government to make changes with you. But you also start talking to residents, as we've been doing on this campaign, about the opportunities that are around them. When people are leaving downtown, I look at that as opportunity for a young entrepreneur to stake their claim in Pittsburgh. And we're not talking about that because there is no vision right now. And I'm eager to do this job. I think we can really turn Pittsburgh around and make it a city that people want to grow and raise their families in again, and companies want to be back in Pittsburgh again. And that's something that we've been working on for a number of years through my record on city council. But also, now that we're in the campaign, that is a message that is resonating because we deserve better. And Pittsburghers, I encourage you to look at our website. Please, if you have any questions, please call us. I'm on the streets door knocking every day. We want to be out in your community hearing from you about the changes that you would like to see in our city.
Corey O'Connor is a Democratic candidate seeking mayor of Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.